listeners, really delighted to chat to legendary coach and former South African cricketer and person who's been doing a great job in the LPL, and Eric Simons. Eric, thank you so much for your time. Really good to have you on the show. And starting off with your current movements, you're now involved in coaching the coaches at Curra Schools, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Thanks for inviting me on. Good to be with you, chatting. Yes, it's I've got a quite a diverse life. One of the things I do is property development, and I actually had a conversation with Cura around a property development prospect that we were both looking at, and that didn't happen. But in conversation, my other passion, cricket, came up, and we just spoke about it. And over the years, I think the buzzword is IP. One gets a lot of knowledge, hopefully, around the game of cricket, and we just spoke about getting involved with the coaches, and I've really enjoyed it. The thing about it is, hopefully, I've taught them something, but it's a different ballgame. So it's a two-way street in many ways.
No, for sure. Yeah, very much so. It's quite interesting. But it's interesting to hear that you're interested in property. We learn something new every day. But in terms of the pipeline in school cricket, how important do you think it is to sort of keep encouraging learners to keep playing the game after school?
It's fundamental to the success of the game. And it's one of the things that I have a concern with. And I hope the new structures, I can't profess to be an expert on the new structures that Cricket South Africa put in place. But one of the things that happened years ago was that cricketers, even like myself, and I'll put myself in that category, Gary Kirsten, Craig Matthews, my Western Province colleagues, really only blossomed as cricketers later in life. And I know that the franchise system we had previously, a player like Gary wouldn't have come through, because at the age of 25 or whatever it was, when he sort of really made his name in that system, you're off the radar. So I think it's important to play cricket, and I think it's important cricket has structures that encourages it, because a lot of the game of cricket is about players maturing at a different level, particularly batsmen. So it is very important. It's very important, if you've got a vision and you've got a dream for yourself, to not lose faith, not lose patience, because you never know. I suppose the legendary stories of Mike Hussey, I think he made the Australian side at 30 years old or something like that. So it's very important to keep going. But to do it, you need patience, you need passion, and that's important. But that's the truth of the game of cricket.
Yeah, it's a fascinating game indeed. Anything's possible. It really, really is. Yeah. But you mentioned Gary Kirsten there, and obviously there's yourself, and you guys are obviously giving back, like we mentioned before. And do you feel it's sort of, I don't know, critical for the health of cricket in South Africa, for the experienced coaches to come back and give back to the game and just be involved in cricket at a school level, at a franchise level, whatever it may be?
It's an incredible thing about your journey. If I think of my journey and little throwaway conversations, little conversations you have all along the way with different cricketers, different coaches, different ideas, and there's just little nuggets of information that you pick up along the way that eventually make you as a cricketer. And sometimes it's something very small, very fundamental. I always say, as a cricket coach, you have to accept that you might plant an acorn but never actually sit under the tree, or never sit in the shade. You might never actually benefit from what you've done, but down the line that conversation will happen. And I think it is very important. People have got these experiences, people have got these lessons, to just be interacting on the best level you possibly can. That's the one side of the story. The other side of the story is that, to use another metaphor or another analogy, is the soil's got to be fertile. As a young cricketer, you have to have an inquiring mind. You have to be inquisitive, and you have to be listening to those stories and those things. And I remember when Graham Smith came to Cape Town, I was coach of Western Province at the time, and there was one of the hallmarks of him was that he wanted to talk to ex-cricketers and just listen and learn and take it in. So it is a two-way street. I often use the story that it doesn't help if a doctor gives you tablets, you take it home and put it next to your bed and never take them. It's what you do with that information that's very, very important. So it is important for ex-cricketers, whoever you are, to be willing to engage and have these conversations. And you never know which lands, but it's also very important for the young cricketers to have a fertile mind and looking for information, to be engaging and making that opportunity, creating the opportunity.
Sure, I really enjoyed your saying about planting the acorn and not always being in the shade. But that's something to think about. I think for a lot of aspiring coaches as well, because you might put a lot of effort into your youngster, and you feel, well, when's the fruit going to come? But like we said earlier, look at Mike Hussey. it's a time game. That's why cricket's such a beautiful game. It's there's so much to it. It's interesting, really interesting.
I think one of the key lessons I've learned as a coach as I've gone on through my coaching career is that it's not your time anymore. You have to put your ego aside, and you have to take a sort of sense of achievement or pleasure or whatever it is out of seeing success that you're never recognized for, and you have to learn to do that. Because if you're a really good coach and your communication is good and the way you give them knowledge, it becomes part of who the player is. And he might never know where it's come from. He might never know it was a conversation. It just becomes so part of who they are. That's when you've really achieved something as a coach. And so even if they never acknowledge it, they never understand it, you must still be able to sit back on your bench or in the dugout and smile to yourself and say, I did plant that acorn, and I might never be acknowledged, but I take pleasure from it. And I think that understanding from me as a coach was very important, just in understanding the role that we play, and also getting a sense of peace from the job that we do. It's not about us anymore. It's about who we work with, and that's important.
Sure. Great, Eric. I really agree with what you're saying. I think it's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. But then what got you into coaching in the first place, Eric?
That's a funny story. So when I played cricket, that's many years ago. We were paid. I was professional in the sense that I received a check at the end of the month. I think my first check was, I don't even know, 200 Rand or something for the month or something stupid. We used to play those Benson Hedges night games at Newlands, and I think if we won, we got 90 Rand. If we lost, we got 60 or something stupid. The point being, we never earned a lot of money, and I actually had a civil construction business through my playing career, and that was one of my key focuses. And then Duncan Fletcher arrived when I was about 29, 30, back into my career. And I've always credited him with giving me a new insight into the game and new interest in the game. He gave me a far more broader understanding of cricket and what it's about. And I believe if I hadn't worked with him, I don't think I'd have coached. Because as I moved into the back end of my career, I became more of a scholar of the game. And then I just got a phone call I retired from playing after 17 years playing for Province. And I got a phone call saying, are you interested in coaching? And I thought, well, why not? I had my own business, and I started coaching the academy side, eventually the Province B side, and 2 or 3 years later, the Province A side with Vincent Barnes. And then that was it, basically the story of this journey. And, if you ask me, did I always want to be a coach? Absolutely not. Duncan Fletcher instilled the love of the game at another level. And then they just gave me a call. I'll never know why they found me, but they did.
Well, we haven't looked back since then, Eric. It's been brilliant because, there's so many stories we can talk about your career and what you've achieved, but we've only got a certain amount of time, so try and get the most juicy ones out of you. But we're certainly going to swing away from that just for now. And I've been amazed to see how many South African coaches are coaching currently this T20 World Cup. Afghanistan, Pakistan, Scotland, Ireland, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. That's has to be positive, doesn't it?
It is remarkable. It is wonderful. And every time you put the television on, there's an interview being done. You're seeing, I saw Lance Klusen's head pop up with the Afghanistan chaps, and it's endless. It's just out there. It is incredible. And it is, let me tell you, it is such an education for us as coaches. I worked with Gary in India, so it's not just the cricket and the way we see that, because you move into a culture, so much about coaching is communication. And as a South African, I arrive in India and I want to coach as a South African. It doesn't work. You need to understand how to communicate with an Indian cricketer. And that was one of the journeys. And every one of those coaches is doing the same thing. Then you go to the IPL and you've got 7 different nations. So you can't have one conversation. One message might be given differently to each person. You need to learn. You need to communicate. I would say the quality of communication is not to say, it's what can be received by the person. And that makes good communication. You need to understand how that person receives it, and then you can have good communication. So the lessons that all these guys are learning of coaches is incredible. They're learning about left-hand bowler might play spin, or batsman might play in spin, or whatever, but they're also learning incredible life lessons about coaching and influencing people. And that, to me, is fundamentally more important in many ways, the art of coaching. So it is tremendous to see these guys out there doing so well.
Yeah, no, it's quite something because, you've been there, and we always talk about India, and the passion they have for the game, but that must almost maybe blow you back every time you go there, because it's like an unending, passionate, undying love for the game. That must also give you sort of like even more of a drive and a motivation to maybe prove your worth there or just be involved, because it's almost like there's a conditional support there. They're just going to keep going and, you know, backing you in every aspect because they just love the game.
I'm actually going to disagree with you completely.
Okay.
Because I think eventually you sort of get used to it. You get used to what's going on around you, and you know, to have walked into one of my first practices, I was standing with Gary Kirsten, and you know, we had Verinder Sehwag and Sachin Tendulkar in the nets, followed by Vivesh Lakshman, and then Rahul Dravid, and you know, if you just name the names of the guys that were going to batting, it was just like, what are we doing here with these legends of the game? And then spend that time with them and see the adulation, as you mentioned, that these guys get. But you have to ultimately get used to it. You have to understand that it's just part of life. You know, but at the end of the day, ultimately, one of the big lessons I've learned is I don't care who the person is, how big they are, how big their name is. They are more like us than they're not like us. And that we're people, and some guys happen to end up doing these incredible things on the cricket field, and it's fantastic, and they get the adulation. But deep down, they all have the same fears, same insecurities, same challenges in life, same things that they have to go through. So I think one needs to, and one does get over that very quickly. So to be quite honest with you, my involvement right now is completely selfish. I just love going there. I love doing it. Every single IPL I go to, I learn something.
Sure.
Enriched as a human being. And I think when that stops, that's when I'll stop going. But I learned so much.
But you mentioned the IPL, and it's a fascinating competition. And why I say that is that often you think it's the same competition every year in and out, but they just seem to change it and make it than the one before. How do they do that, Eric? How do they make it sort of like almost tantalizing, like, flip, I want to watch this season. It's interesting. How do they do that?
I think, first of all, the T20 product is a great product. And I think when it came, I think all of us as cricket supporters, cricket lovers, were skeptical, were interested in it, but it's evolved to... I think it would be unfair to call it hit and giggle, but there wasn't a lot of strategy around the game. But right now, it is an incredibly strategic game. You know, the things that we look at, the things that we work on and talk about. So we, you know, like just, you know, we talk about as a Chennai bowling unit, how do we go for 4, not 6? It's like, you look at, like, you know, wow. But we've had a few games where we've said, you know, we've gone for 10 fours, or instead of 10, we save 13 runs, or whatever it is. And, you know, we get there, and we're so involved in the game. And we have practices in the evening in Dubai. We get back to the hotel room, and there's a game on, and you say, I feel like watching, but it just grabs you. And before you know it, you've watched the end. And I do think it's the product. I think it's the fact that the players move around. So there's dynamics in terms of where players are, you know, different makeups, different balances, different wickets, different aspects to it. And then I love watching, and I love being involved with, but also watching David Warner bat with some Indian cricketer, or Faf batting with Ruturaj in CSK, you know, and just those different guys that normally would have battles. You can imagine a team meeting of a group of bowlers. You know, we had an Australian, a South African, a few Indian guys, and the West Indian, and they're talking about the South African batsman we're playing against, and they're giving some ideas and thoughts. It's dynamic in that. So I think that comes across in watching, and I think it grabs people. But as I said, even as someone in the tournament, you still get back to your hotel room and want to watch.
No, for sure. It really is. But you obviously were the bowling consultant for CSK, and it was quite an accomplished season this season, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, any season you win the IPL, you come away with a sense. Hang on, but it wasn't just that. I really was pleased on two fronts in particular. The one was that the last season was very disappointing for us. We've qualified for the knockouts every year, and then last year we didn't in Dubai. We were poor and we didn't make it, and we were out of the qualifying battle very early as well, you know, with 4 games to 5 games to go. So that was very disappointing for the franchise. And then to come back and do as well as we did, it was a real hallmark of the attitude of the CSK franchise and the players, and hopefully the staff as well. But on the second front is the way we went about it. I think we got our strategies right. I always watch a game and not just look at the outcome. I look at the way it's put together, and I thought there were a few gems amongst us. Faf du Plessis was outstanding. Ruturaj, who opened the batting, I think was as outstanding. MS Dhoni, to be around him and his leadership, just in terms of inspiration, it was brilliant. and guys just stood up. Jadeja is one of the best sportsmen I've ever worked with. I'm sure you've watched him from the side, but if you're with him and you just see what he's capable of, he really is an outstanding sportsman, let alone cricketer. And the bowling front as well. We know our bowling attack. We don't have a Bumrah or a KG or a Rashid Khan. We spoke very much about how we operate as a unit, and we used to speak about a strategy of 120 death by 120 cuts. Every single ball plays a role in building up pressure. It might not be your day, but if you build it up, we lead in the power play, we lead into the spinners, and the spinners have got a job to play to make the back end easier. And it's that kind of thinking. So from my side, it was those two things. The fact that we did so poorly last year, and then the way we went about it this year, the way we put our strategies into place. And we had one or two really bad games towards the back end, and then learned from it and took the tactics that we did. I don't know if you watched the game against Rajasthan, we got a bit of a pounding. Took the tactics and what we learned from that to apply to the last few games and then see it unfold. So from that perspective, it was very rewarding for all of us, but obviously particularly for us as coaches.
Well done on winning the RPL. Like you said, it is a really fantastic effort, and you could just see that the guys seemed to be really just tuned in, and things were just ticking. It was great to see. But I think I mean, you mentioned him, but MS Dhoni, that guy must almost have like an aura around him to do what he does, and I think he can pull strings and just get the more out of players as much as you do. He can as well, like just because of his experience and how he deals with players.
MS is the classic example of someone who leads by example, the way he does things, the way he practices. I mean, he practices incredibly hard leading up to the tournament. Once the tournament starts, we're very aware of energy and not overdoing it. I'll tell you a story. It probably epitomizes the ski setup, just in terms of a professional, a calm focus and understanding where you are as a cricketer. So we played on the Sunday. We beat Delhi Capitals to what's called the qualifier. So we beat them to qualify for the final on the Friday, which means we had the week off. So we took Monday and Tuesday off, played some golf, which was great. And then we practiced on the Wednesday and the Thursday leading into the final of the IPL. The Wednesday, most of the guys were down. Thursday was the last practice before the final of the IPL. And there were 4 players from the 11 that walked onto the field the next day at the practice, because it's all optional. And to me, when that happened, I knew we were ready. It just said the guys knew that the preparation wasn't about being in the nets. It was about psychologically was on the right place. If I'm feeling good, I don't need to go to the nets. And that told me a lot. And a lot of that comes from him. He doesn't get overly excited. He sees it for what it is. You can't but not, be similar. And that's probably the biggest role in my mind that he plays as an individual.
Awesome. Yeah, always awesome to watch. Never a dull moment. But one person who really did fantastic, and Faf du Plessis really has broad shoulders. But more importantly, how did he sort of manage to turn his performances this season? Because he really got stuck in, and there was almost no fear. He just really showed people what he's capable of doing with the bat. I know you're the bowling coach, Eric, so I hope you don't mind me asking you these questions, but it's just interesting to see all these different perspectives.
So to me, it's actually a very interesting story. And Faf and I are very close. We've got a history of from the CPL already working together, and we spend a lot of time together just talking about life and stuff in general. So he recognized the importance of the T20 game in his career, and he wanted to improve himself as a player. And he went to try and become what we would call a power player, to hit the boundaries and get the ball over the fence as much as possible. Chris Gale's a typical power player. To me, you get power players and you get what you call touch players, guys that manipulate the ball. So someone like a Danish Kartik or Tim Bavuma in many ways is a touch player. He's not someone that powers the ball. Chris Gale is a touch and power. So Chris Gale, typical power player, and someone like Temba is a more of a touch player than a power player. So Faf tried to become a power player, and he worked on it for ages. Worked on his swing and how to generate bat speed, and it just wasn't working. And he wasn't improving, and he wasn't showing consistency, or wasn't showing the form he wanted to. And then he changed his attitude completely and looked at himself as a cricketer and tried to work out how he could become more effective. And he started doing things like shots, but within the way that he works. So you've seen him play that paddle over fine leg, which is a new shot that he plays. And he plays it in the first over if he needs to. But what that does is it means that you cannot bowl with a 45 up anymore. You've got to drop a man back. So when you drop him back, it means there's a gap somewhere else. Now you can hit the ball in that area. And that's what he's done. So he works incredibly hard on his position and able to hit balls into areas rather than power it. And through that has increased his shot selection ability and repertoire of shots tremendously. And that has been incredible to watch, to see how he has evolved as a batsman. So it's not a mistake. It's not he's just become this better cricketer. He's worked specific on things. He tried to become power, and to me, he then went to increasing repertoire of shots but staying within who he is as a player. And I think that's for me as a coach, to see what you can do and what you can't do. It's a little bit like a batsman, like a bowler. We always talk, I can't take a 130-kilometer bowler and turn him into 145. I can't. I can make a 130, 132, 133. And batsmen have got the same sort of thing. They've got a tempo that they play with, that they're comfortable with. And it's staying within your tempo and being able to increase your repertoire. And he's, to me, an incredible example of it. That's why he's been so successful.
Hey, great insight, Eric. Really enjoyed that. That's fantastic. Yeah, it's good to see. Really good to see.
Good, man.
But let's go back to bowling. And let's talk a bit about white ball cricket. But from an international perspective, who is standing out for you at the moment where you think, okay, this chap is doing a really good job at the moment with the white ball?
It's difficult to put him in to say him specifically. I think guys play different roles, and that's important. And again, it's important that you understand your roles. I mean, in the spin department, there's so many spinners that are doing so incredibly well at the task they do. So you've got your attacking type bowlers that are able to turn the ball both ways. Your wrist spinners. Rashid Khan is a classic example of someone that does well endlessly. One of the great privileges of my life as a bowling coach, I catch a lot of balls because it tells me a lot about the bowler, and I see little changes and subtleties, and I catch a lot of balls to Imran Tahir, and he is a magician. Wow. So to watch him do and go through his crafts and be able to catch balls and learn to read his different deliveries is phenomenal. So any one of us loves the wrist spinners, the guys that have got the little tricks and that. There's people like him, Nareen Chakravarti from India now, who's a little bit different. Ravi Ashton I've often called him the professor of bowling, of spin bowling, because of just his ability to understand the game and evolve. So the spinners, they're endless. And then you've got guys, I think one of the guys that's doing exceptionally well at the moment is Anil Hakir. I think he's bowling really well. He's been consistent. You start to see, and like I said, I will look at a bowler and get 3 wickets and say he's bowled rubbish, or I'll look at him bowl no wickets and say he's bowled brilliantly. And I can start seeing tactics coming through in the way he's trying to do it and what he's trying to do. And that I enjoy. But then we got a guy like Josh Hazlewood. And Josh Hazlewood is a typical test bowler. He bowls lengths. But he's learned again to take his skills and apply it to the T20 game in a way that's been brilliant. So I mean, one of the things about this game that's evolved is that when the game started, Glenn McGrath was bowling to a test batsman. So running up and bowling a good line and a good length, those guys could play that ball. They could play top of off stump and they could hit over extra, do whatever they think. But as the game's evolved, batsmen have become what I call open face or closed face. They play very square of the wicket. And what's happened is their skills to play against the Glenn McGrath is not as good as it used to be. So if Glenn McGrath came back into the game now and just bowled the top of off stump, he'd be very successful. Sure. Because the batting techniques have changed. And that's one of the things that's happened. And then suddenly you got a guy like Josh Hazlewood that's come in and he said, no, I'm going to stick to what I do. And that was what we encouraged him to do. Stick to your thing. You just stay there, top of off stump, keep hammering away. They'll have a hit at you, but the techniques are not good enough as they used to be. And so I enjoy guys like that have taken their skills and allowed it to evolve. But probably for me, in terms of absolute seam bowling, somebody like Anil Hakir stood out. The swing wasn't really a factor in Dubai this year. So you've got guys like Bhuvnesh Kumar, who played for Sunrisers. I love watching him bowl. His skill is outstanding. But when the ball doesn't swing, he's not as good. And we had Deepak Chahar as well. Brilliant swing bowler, but he wasn't quite as effective because he didn't get the swing. So they haven't had a great 2 or 3 months because of that. They've again had to change their tactics to be effective. But I suppose the other two for me stand out. I'm trying to think of some other chaps. There were some great left-handers that did really well during the tournament. But they're all over the place now. Every team's got somebody. Mustafa from Bangladesh. I love watching him bowl with his really quick wrist. Each one's got their own skills to marvel at and to enjoy. But I like to see a guy who can execute. If a bowler can execute, stick to a plan, you can see it evolving. I respect that.
Sure, Eric, great stuff. There's a lot to get from there. I really, really enjoy that. But dare I ask, South Africa's bowling unit, how do you think we're doing if you sort of give us an overall summary? We seem to be in a good space at the moment.
Yeah, I probably was a bit unfair to dear old Shamsi. He's also one of the spin rates number one in the world at the moment. But you know, as crazy as it might sound, the real cutting edge of the game is the IPL, and unfortunately, he hasn't had too many games yet. I think it sounds weird, but that's where you're going to be tested ultimately. So I'd love to see Shamsi actually get a few games in the IPL and see what he can do. But Tabriaz he's a really good bowler. But to your point, I actually think we've got a very well balanced team throughout. You know, we've got even under Markram in the top order, can bowl some off spin if you need it to become very effective. We've got Pretorius who's bowled. They've done a good job with the slow balls and the cutters. We've got Kagiso and Andrich, a great partnership together. I'd like to see a little more. There's still some tweaking that can be done there. I think just in tightness and tactics. I think together are standing. And Lungin Gidi is a very underrated T20 bowler. I really think he's unfortunate that he's not playing more. He didn't play a lot for us because Josh did really well, and he's not playing too much for South Africa because Andrich and KG have sort of got their noses in front. But he's a very, very good T20 bowler, and I'd love to see him get a run as well. And then you throw someone like Shabriaz Tamzi into the mix, and he plays a role, and Maharav as well. We've got a lot of balance. We've got a guy that can turn the off. We've got a left armer, the left arm leg spin, and we've got the two real quickies, and then Andrich Pretorius who bowls cutters. You know, so we've got all those bases covered, and I think that's pretty much what you want.
Yeah, for sure. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Andrich Nokia broke the record or something like that, because I think he hit 153 kilometers an hour bowling at the T20 World Cup now or something like that. It was absolute gas. So he's proper.
It was, and we do watch these games together as well. And when he started hitting that sort of numbers, there was a buzz through our team as well. So, but again, that's part of the game. The other thing is the accuracy. You got to have accuracy when you bowl, and he's improved tremendously.
For sure. But we're going to sort of draw towards an end, Eric. So just a couple of more questions. And just picking your brain here, the likes of Scotland and Ireland just are moving upwards in leaps and bounds. I mean, to see the World Cup it's just, there we go, even Namibia. Fantastic. What do you think's led to the success? What is it? How? I know there's a hunger for success. I'm sure there is. But it's not just going and doing the basic stuff. There must be real attention to detail. What do you think's been the reason for their success lately?
I think it's difficult to put a finger on one thing in particular. I think there's a lot of information out there now that guys can tap into, and they are doing that. I think there's a professionalism at those levels that are coming through without a doubt, not in fitness, but just in terms of general training and practice. There's money to be made. You know, there's success to be. There's a pathway to the top that's now obvious. And that's led to guys just being a little more motivated. You know, I think that's great as long as you got the opportunity. It's a bit like the FA Cup. I mean, you know, it doesn't matter where you are. You all play and you can get through it. And Namibia has been outstanding in the way they've gone about their job and the professionalism that they've shown. To me as a standout, just in terms of the numbers, for the conditions. And I'll use the word worse, but I don't mean that because I quite like low-scoring games. I think it's a fascinating game. So it's probably a bad word. It's not the right word to use, but it does bring teams together. And if you can be smart, you know, we again, one of the things that we talk about in Chennai is not to be the best bowling unit, but being the smartest bowling unit. And I think that's something that the guys are able to do in those conditions, is be smart about the way they do their job. And suddenly if you when you're on those conditions, it does bring teams a little closer together. And it's meant that guys are able to believe in themselves when they're chasing a lower total, or the wicket gives them some protection as a bowler, you know. So that has played a role, but it's great for all the associates.
Sure. But generally speaking, then, you believe cricket's in good hands. There seems to be global interest, and it's growing. You think cricket's in a really good place at the moment globally?
I do. I mean, I think it comes in ebbs and flows. I think the T20 competition has created new interest from a new market perspective. And the other thing, we had the previous IPL, the first half of the IPL was just before the Test Championship. And it was great to see the buzz taking place within the competition around the Test Championship. So India were playing New Zealand across the UK. And generally, Test cricket is the pinnacle, and the guys love the game, and it is where they test it. I think now it might again create new interest in, but a lot of the game does start there, and when we've seen the India-England series was tremendous. There's been some great Test series around the world. So yes, I think the game is in good hands at the moment, and there's exciting aspects of it. The success of T20, I'm not sure it's going to affect the 50-over game, whether people will get bored with it because it's similar, and then you have that middle period that, as cricket lovers, we enjoy it because it has a different dynamic to it. But a lot of people might say, let's take that out. Let's just play the end and the beginning and see how that goes, because that's where the real interesting parts are.
No, for sure. Well, Eric, been a great chat. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for giving so much to talk about, because it's really nice to have someone who's actually on the inside, being part of the RPL. Wow, really honored to chat to you, and thank you so much for your time, Eric.
Pleasure. Nice to be good chatting, as we always talk about this game.
Eric, thank you for your time.
All right, man. Pleasure. All the best.
Well. All the best, man. Cheers, man.
Okay, cheers.